these deep connections were real for me and they were inspiring to me, and I wanted to share them with the world. And so I started to realize I need somewhere else to share this, and I need a bigger microphone. So I thought, well, somebody had mentioned podcasting, and I was not a podcast person. I didn't listen to podcasts. That was not me. And I said, well, that makes sense, but I don't know. So I kind of just put that idea aside. And once I sold my business, I was like, it's time to start the podcast. So I didn't know what I was going to name it. And I called it Tammy Tuesday. And it's funny because the name really doesn't have anything to do with the topics that we discuss.
But it's you.
Except for the fact that the reason Tammy Tuesday exists is because Tammy chose Tammy.
Yeah.
That's about self-love, and that is what we talk about on the podcast.
What's up, good people? Eric Taylor back again with another amazing episode of my Knowledge is Love Astrology Podcast. And today I have an amazing guest. She's a spiritual life coach, an entrepreneur who has creative studios, which is going to be an amazing place. And she also has one of the best podcasts where I was fortunate enough to be a guest on, Tammy Tuesday. Today, I welcome on episode 230, Miss Tammy Fellows. How are you today, Tammy?
I am so good, Eric. I'm so happy to be here. You are such a ray of light, and I just love being around your energy. So thank you for having me.
Oh, listen, I got to, right off the bat, we have to, just knock it out before we even get to how we met or whatever, and which you shared and we shared on your podcast. We have similar energies. So Tammy is the Libra rising. That's very different from my Scorpio rising. But she's a Virgo moon and a Capricorn sun. I'm a Virgo sun and a Capricorn moon. So we have that familiar energy to one another. So I think that's where some of it stems, and the connection more in the spiritual realm, and I love that. So I want to kind of find out today, what really started Tammy Tuesday, the podcast? Because I love the intention, the vision, and I just think you're such a natural and amazing podcast host. Where did it birth from?
Oh, thank you for that. So it's interesting because in my past life, in this life, I have always been an entrepreneur, and I've always been my name is Tammy, and I'm a workaholic person. And so with that came extreme burnout. And I got to a point in my entrepreneurship and career and different businesses that I've had in the past that I truly was burnt out, and I needed to take back some time for me. And so I had to figure out a day that I could take for Tammy, because I have 4 kids, I'm married, I had multiple businesses, too much. And I was not giving myself anything back. There was no self-love in that equation. And well, it's time to figure this out, because I was starting to lose my memory. I mean, lots of things were happening. Wow. And of course, I had health issues. I had a near-death experience, I think, which was because of that as well. It was kind of an indicator like, hey, it's time to wake up. But many things started happening. And what happened was I decided to find one day out of the week that I could claim as my own. It was going to be Tammy's day, and I was going to claim it, and nobody could touch it. And it was for me to do whatever I wanted, whether I wanted to sit on the couch and sleep all day, if I wanted to go for a hike or a run or whatever I wanted to do. It was going to be my day that nobody could touch.
Which you would deserve as a mother of 4 sons. You would deserve that day.
Right. And most people say that's not possible. And, there's obviously life happens. So yeah, you have to be realistic with what this is. But I was pretty good at it in the beginning. And when I started to develop this day, I figured Tuesday was the one day out of the week that actually made sense in my schedule on a regular basis. So I thought, I could take Tuesdays. Tuesdays could be my day. And then all of a sudden I got the download, Tammy Tuesday. It's like, oh, that's kind of cute. It has a little ring. It's catchy, but it was just for me. Right. So, but then I started sharing it with all my friends and family. I started making posts on social media about my Tammy Tuesday and the things that I would do. Again, just for me. And I was sharing it strategically only because I wanted to, one, be held accountable to continue to do it. Because I knew that if I didn't start sharing it, then I'd slowly drift away from the mission.
Right. You go back to working. Yeah.
Exactly. Because that was my nature.
Yeah.
That's my pattern. So what I shared it for that reason. And the second reason I shared it was I wanted to inspire others to do that for themselves. Because I saw that that's so much of what people are missing in life, is to take time back for themselves and to pour love back into themselves. We lose ourselves in our busyness. So it's time to take that back, because you can't serve anyone if you're not serving yourself first. And what happens is when you start to serve yourself, you automatically want to serve everybody else. That's what's so ironic about it.
Yeah.
So I started to learn this very quickly, and Tammy Tuesday was my thing. Well, later that year, my husband, who's a character, and I love him to pieces, he's truly a muse of mine. He bought the domain TammyTuesday.com for Mother's Day.
Oh.
And I thought, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I said, this is just my day. I'm calling it. This is not a thing. This is just mine. And he said, oh, no. This is a thing. I don't think you realize this is a thing. This is going to go somewhere for you. I can just tell.
Yeah.
And he's my muse. He sees things differently in a way that I don't see them. So I thought, well, okay, haha. So fast forward, I ended up going down a road where I realized it was time to move away from my business and sell my business, because the burnout was real and it's time to shift. So I thought, okay, once I started figuring out I wanted to sell my business, what was happening in my business, I own 2 luxury magazines locally here in Arizona. Okay. And I started meeting the most incredible people. And I would sit down.
Imagine,
I'd sit down across the table from somebody, and all of a sudden they would start telling me their whole life, which has always gone into my life. People just share with me. Yeah. Obviously an open place for people to share, which I love. And I would sit across the table from people. I didn't really know what I was sitting about, whether I was selling them advertising or if they were trying to pitch me something for a story in the magazine. I never really knew what was going to happen, but I knew something was always going to happen, because it always did. So I would say the majority of the time I would get these life stories and meet these amazing people and get to know them. And I'd come home and I would say, oh my gosh, Eric, you're not going to believe who I met today. I met the most incredible person. And I would tell him, and I'd be like, we both were crying and it was so beautiful. And so it became this joke where every time I'd come home, he'd say, who did you cry with today?
I love that.
It was not far from the truth. That really was a lot of the times how my day would go. So
right.
Anyway, as I met these people, I realized that the magazine platform, these beautiful publications, were not the platform to share these inspirational stories that I was receiving across the table. And I thought, I need a different platform, because everybody has a story, first of all. And these deep connections were real for me, and they were inspiring to me, and I wanted to share them with the world. And so I started to realize I need somewhere else to share this, and I need a bigger microphone. So I thought, well, somebody had mentioned podcasting, and I was not a podcast person. I didn't listen to podcasts. That was not me. And I said, well, that makes sense, but I don't know. So I kind of just put that idea aside. And once I sold my business, I was like, it's time to start the podcast. So I didn't know what I was going to name it. And I called it Tammy Tuesday. And it's funny because the name really doesn't have anything to do with the topics that we discuss.
But it's you.
Except for the fact that the reason Tammy Tuesday exists is because Tammy chose Tammy.
Yeah.
That's about self-love. And that is what we talk about on the podcast.
I love this so much, because as you're sharing this with the audience, and I've got so much to say about it. And yes, you and your husband both married well. Tammy's husband, his name is Eric. And, when 2 Erics meet, it usually could be something magical and great. And he is just a breath of fresh air and super, super hilarious. So I love that. And the fact that he is your muse and could point this out and visually see it into the future, right? And your husband's an Aquarius, so he's definitely that type of visionary. But when you were talking about the magazine, you've got Neptune and conjunct Mercury in your 3rd house in Sagittarius, which is your skills, writing, reading, communications, and the local community. And Mercury, Neptune, it really describes what you were saying, having these crying moments and these real deeper than average and normal conversations. And then in the same breath, now you're translating that to your podcast. And then on top of it, you're going through your nodal reversal. You've got the Libra North Node in the first house. And so this journey, this soul remembering, this life experience for you, you are to focus on self-love and really having the inner harmony and peace with Tammy. You can't even make it up. Like, you are dancing right in that chart. So I want to ask you with that, as the podcast grows, where have you seen your spiritual insights and gifts play out in the podcast itself? And how do you envision it even more so expanding in the future?
So it's been really interesting. And I've said this a lot on my podcast as I have these amazing conversations that we get to share with the world. The reason I started doing it again was for me. And as I have these conversations, just like I'm having right now, these are growth moments for me. I learn and I experience something totally new each time I do it. I just happen to be being recorded when we're doing these things. I was doing this in private for years.
Exactly.
Now it's being displayed, which is great because then other people can enjoy it too, which is the whole reason. But what I will say on my journey, as I've started this podcast and what I've learned and how I've grown, is I've really understood how implementation and experience is really where it's at, because we can become knowledgeable on all kinds of things. But where it really counts is when it becomes more of a wisdom for yourself, because you've actually had some level of experience with it. So what I've learned from the guests and different conversations we've had on the podcast is that as I continue to evolve spiritually for myself and my own journey, I'm taking bits and pieces of things that I'm discovering from these conversations that maybe I didn't know about. And then the things that fit into Tammy, I start implementing into my practices. And so what's happened is it's continued my spiritual growth. And I've learned so much about myself and my mission and my purpose, right? Because it's called Tammy Tuesday Life, Love, Purpose. So, because we talk about all those things. Yeah. And so for me, what I've discovered, and I think one of my natural gifts has always been, is to help people find their purpose, because we all have one. And it's unique to each one of us. And so through these conversations and with people and through coaching and the conversations and communication that I've had, that's what tends to happen. Something triggers someone to say, okay, I'm not satisfied. I mean, I lived this. I'm not satisfied. Something's missing. Even though I had reached all the successes and the accolades that I had done, didn't matter. Something was missing. So that caused me to dig in deep. And that's when I started discovering these things. And as I've had this walk now through this podcast, it's really become more clear to me that is part of my mission and purpose here, is to help people wake up to their soul selves so they can step into their real purpose, so they can live a joyful, fulfilling life. So that's the main thing. I mean,
I love that. Wait, so, okay. We can't just skate past the NDE, and I want to talk about sort of your spiritual awakening. But before we get there, I want to bring it back home to the youth. Who was Tammy around 10 years old? And could she have ever envisioned and imagined the business, the spiritual growth, the husband, the 4 boys? Like, who is young Tammy?
So it's interesting because 8 was a big period of time for me. There a lot of things happened. My parents divorced.
Okay, so
there was a lot of change and shifting going on. And by the time I got to age 10, I've had some real epiphanies in my spiritual walk about events that have happened and that have created the choices that I've made, which makes so much sense now that I've looked at the big picture so far. And that is that at age 10, I had already begun to abandon child Tammy and become Tammy. And the reason I did that, I now know in my spiritual walk and the experiences that I've had and digging deep enough to discover this, is that around age 8, when my parents split, I'm the youngest of 5 siblings. Okay. So I'm the baby.
Yeah.
And when you're in a large family, it's really difficult to be heard or seen because there's a lot of you. And so for me, what I learned was one pivotal moment of me speaking up in an adult tone as a child got everybody's attention.
Wow.
So I said, oh, that worked. So from then on, I composed myself much older than I was, and I completely abandoned 10-year-old Tammy, which is sad.
I could imagine. I mean, so that's really deep, especially being the Capricorn sun, right? The mantra of Capricorn, and you've definitely lived it out. It's work hard,
Yep.
then play hard. And when Capricorns play, they can play really hard, but they can really wear and burn themselves out. That pressure for status, success, the husband, the kids, the dog, the white picket fence, like the workaholicism can be extremely strong for Capricorns. And I experience it myself with the Capricorn moon, you know, and I joke, like, I wish there was 30 hours in a day so I could sleep for 6 and work for 24. Like, it just, I don't know, it's just something that's inside. But that is pretty fascinating. And so how did your older siblings sort of respond to that moment? But then even after that, did they see you as a more mature Tammy, or how did that like play out, you think?
That's a great question. I would say to some degree, yes. It was kind of, this is a funny joke, a childhood sibling joke, but they always would say, like, if they were doing something rebelling against the parents, right, they'd say, not don't tell mom and dad, they'd say, don't tell Tammy, because Tammy's a narc. And that was real. And it was like, because that was my only, again, my way of having a voice, I suppose. But even in that, it of course shifted, and I complied because I wanted to be let in on stuff. So I learned to keep quiet and be included in the stuff. And what happened was, like, here's another prime example. My whole family knows this. We've talked about it for years. We're a very active family. So we go skiing in the winter, and being the youngest, we all grew up skiing, thankfully, which was a huge gift and blessing in our lives, because it's a very expensive sport, especially.
A lot of fun. I used to ski growing up, then I know. And then it got too cold for me at like 14. I was like, I'm done.
Yeah. But we'd go skiing, and what would happen is everybody would go, we'd get off, and we're going to go down a Black Diamond. And I'm like 5. And it was like, bye. And they would leave. And the only way down was for me to go down this hill. So Tammy had to suck it up and make her way down. They waited for me down at the bottom, but it was like sink or swim.
Nobody was holding your hand to get there, though.
Nope. So I had to learn very quickly at a very young age that in order to survive in this family, I had to suck it up and just do it. And I've done that for my whole life. I mean, I've just done that. And it's created patterns for me, which, again, none of it's bad. I wouldn't change a thing.
Right.
I wouldn't change a thing. I love it. I love who I am. I love what I've done. I love all of it.
Yeah.
But it did create some patterns for me. So I think that they were impressed, and they've shared with me that they're impressed that I could actually do that. Now, don't get me wrong. There was plenty of tears involved.
Right. Of course. Definitely.
I would do it. I would do it. And they knew I would. They knew I would, because I always would.
Wow. See, and that's fascinating because, you know, as human beings, we can have tremendous blind spots, not seeing ourselves clearly, but sometimes our siblings, parents, a spouse may be able to see things in us, and even gifts that we cannot recognize in ourselves. So I want to get back to the NDE. Was it before, or did it introduce sort of your spiritual awakening and make you kind of see that there's more than just the grind and the 9 to 5, and that there is a purpose in our soul and all this spiritual stuff that you are now? What was the order, and share the story with the audience?
So the biggest thing was, it wasn't an NDE in the traditional sense how most people hear it, kind of like yours. It was just, I didn't go into a coma, nothing like that.
Right.
What happened was, and I truly believe this was my body responding to the stress.
Right.
I had what's called a spontaneous carotid artery dissection. And it started with a headache. So I have 4 kids, I told you. So after the birth of my 4th son, I developed an extremely bad headache. And I had given birth to him. And then several months later, 3 months later, 4 months later, I had a hysterectomy because it was time.
Yeah.
So I had a hysterectomy, and after my hysterectomy, I was healing, and of course, I had a tiny little baby and all my kids. And I went on a trip up to Montana, which is where my husband's from, because I wanted to cool down. It was summertime. So I wanted to go up there, and he said, why don't you and the baby just go? I'll handle the rest of the kids. Just go and cool off. And I was like, awesome. So I left. Well, on the flight back to Arizona, this headache kicked into high gear when I was in flight. And thankfully, the baby slept the whole time, literally in my lap. But I'm like sobbing because I'm in so much pain. Well, I land, and my husband picks me up, and I instantly start vomiting because I'm so nauseated from this pain.
Wow.
What is going on? And I said, I don't know, but I've got this really, really bad headache. So I go home, and days pass. This headache doesn't go anywhere. My mom, who has had chronic migraines, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that too, because she's had her trauma in her life. She was like, something's not right. And my left eye started to droop. And so she knew something was really wrong. So we went to the ER 2 different times, got sent home. The hospital people thought I was just seeking drugs.
What?
They didn't catch what was going on. This had been going on for a couple of weeks.
Even though you mentioned the extreme head pain, the regurgitation, all that, they just were like, boom, sent you home?
They took it. They did a CAT scan of my head and my brain, and they saw nothing. So they're like, she's whatever, send her home. So I went home, went back again, same thing. Finally, my mom insisted on pounding this till we figured it out. So we went to a neurologist, and he ordered an MRI.
Yes.
That, of course, took a week because it takes a long time to get approval with insurance.
I know.
So fast forward to another week goes by. So they order this MRI, and I go in, have this MRI, and they do it from my chest up to my head. And it wasn't literally 5 minutes of me getting back home from that scan that my phone rang. And it was the doctor saying, you need to get to the ER right now. And I was like, what do you mean? They said, you have a real serious problem. Somebody needs to drive you to the ER right now. And I'm like, what's going on? And they said, well, you have one of your main arteries, your carotid artery, which is one of the ones in the front. There's 2 in the front, there's 2 in the back. And they said one of your main arteries in the carotid artery is completely disintegrated. It's blocking 90% of blood flow to your brain.
Oh my gosh.
And
now, is this coming from the heart or is it in the chest, neck? Like
right here in the neck.
Oh my God.
So I'm like, what? They're like, go. So I call my husband, who was at work, and I said, I'm on my way to the ER. They just said the scan looked really bad. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to figure out more when we get there. So we get there, and keep in mind, I have a little itty bitty baby.
Oh my God.
And 3 other kids.
Yeah.
So I go to the hospital, and they scan. They do a whole bunch of scans, and turns out 3 of the 4 arteries are disintegrating. So,
wow. So worse than what they thought on the MRI.
Yes. So the doctors were scratching their heads like, what? Were you in an accident? Was there a car accident? Did something like...
Right, trying to figure out what created this.
And I said, no, I've literally been laying low, recovering from my surgery, a hysterectomy, which was done through a scope. It wasn't even like a major incision. So... I
wonder do you think that was connected to it though?
There is a theory that it could have been. I'll tell you that. I'll get to that in a little bit. Remind me to tell you about that because it's really interesting. So what ended up happening, I don't want to get too long-winded, but basically the doctors that had been practicing medicine for, umpteen years had never seen anything like this. So I was an anomaly and they didn't understand it. And so while I was at the hospital for about a week, they decided they contemplated surgery and putting a stent in my neck to open the artery back up, or at least one of them. And they were afraid to do that because they thought that I would die on the table. So that wasn't an option. Well, I started to have episodes while I was in the hospital where all of a sudden I would kind of see black, almost like a stroke, but I didn't have a stroke. But I was seeing weird things. And finally, the doctors were scared. And they said,
was this ever affecting your speech?
No.
Your memory?
They would test me when they test stroke patients, they test you like every 15 minutes for different things. So they would do these tests on me and make me all the stuff. And all the while, my head is pounding in pain. So anyway, finally I had this weird episode and they said, get her out of here. She needs to go to Barrows and be in the ICU. So I was evacuated from the hospital and I was sent over to Barrows and they put me in the ICU. and they recontemplated whether they needed to do surgery, which they again decided not to because they thought it was too risky. And in the meantime, my whole family is surrounding my bedside, terrified, like terrified. It was the closest experience I've ever come to my own funeral. That's what it felt like. Yeah. I'm literally surrounded. I have a huge family. And so does Eric. So there was a lot of people and friends in my hospital room crying, trying to figure out what's wrong with Tammy. Is she going to die? And the doctors are saying, I don't know. I don't know if she's going to die. In fact, frankly, I don't know why she's still alive.
Well, I mean, with all that blockage, that's what's so fascinating. Oh my God. So then did they ever do the surgery?
They never did the surgery. What they ended up doing, the end result was they said, let's put her on blood thinners, extreme blood thinners, first through an IV at the hospital, but then I had to take Coumadin, which is pills.
Yes. My mother was on Coumadin. I know it well.
So I was on Coumadin. I had to watch the video of like all these 80-year-old people, and here I am in my 30s. I'm like, this feels weird. Anyway, so I go home and they say, you're thin, your blood is thin enough. You need to just let the arteries heal themselves. And they're like, go home and just take it easy. I'm like, keep your blood pressure down. I'm like, I have 4 little kids, boys. Go home and take it easy. That doesn't exist in my world. I went home, and sure enough, over time, the arteries did heal themselves. And so 3 months later, they scanned again, and everything was 100% healed. And
did the headaches dissipate over time?
Over time. It took a while. But they did dissipate. And that was that. And the doctors, the end prognosis was they ran every test possible on tissue disorders and all kinds of things. Never found anything. And so they said, I think like lightning, it strikes once and I think you're good. But you should live your life cautiously, Tammy, because you never know. Well, Tammy didn't take that for an answer. So how did this shift me? I said, no. Life is beautiful and life is short, and I am not going to live in fear.
Nope.
So it kind of ramped up Tammy's adrenaline junkiness, which I have. And I made some stupid mistakes, some really big stupid mistakes.
Okay.
And I realized that wasn't. But to answer your original question was, did that wake you up? I think that was a huge attempt for my soul to say, Tammy, wake up. I didn't do it, though.
Wow.
Not at that time.
Not yet. Okay.
Nope. That came later.
Okay, wait. So I want to get to when you had this awakening, but this is the key question. Because you have Moon conjunct Saturn in Virgo in the 12th house, when did this actual episode occur? Like what month was this?
The artery?
Yeah.
That happened in September of 2012.
So Virgo season. Oh my gosh. Okay. Because the 12th house is hospitals, and Moon Saturn conjunction, it can literally restrict things in your body for your health. The moon is actually your body, your health, your intuition. And Virgo deals with more of digestion, but Saturn is the actual DNA and lineage. And even it was interesting how you tied in, your mom. And I want to get to her in a minute because I know you've got a fascinating story about your mom and her family, which I think is pretty much about your Moon Saturn conjunction in the 12th house. But that's fascinating. So it was actually in September. Do you remember the date when this first all began or not? Early September, mid?
If I can pull a number, September 12th keeps sticking out to me for some reason. I don't know why.
Okay, so definitely Virgo season. So it's very literal. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. So now, of course, after the show, and I'll have to share with the audience and stuff, and other posts or different things, but like that's going to make me explore, as an astrologer, explore your chart to even see what was going on in September 2012, because that's heavy, because that gets into medical astrology. So now, then from there, you're healing. It's a time, but still not awakening. Were you still, as you're kind of dealing with the newborn and the boys and you're healing, were you still itching to get back to like Tammy grinding and working too hard?
Yes and no. I think what happened was I took it to a different type of extreme. I realized, okay, I'm here. I can do all this. Like I could do this now, but now I'm like you said, they work hard and they play hard.
Yes.
So I was doing both.
Oh, damn it. Hopefully you didn't try to climb Mount Everest or anything.
No, and I don't mean anything crazy, but
No,
I
know.
Like I did it change my pattern? No, it didn't. I after the episode, I thought, wow, life is short. And when they said, you ought to be careful, maybe you shouldn't do such extreme things where there's pressure involved, like scuba diving or whatever. Right. And I was like, well, I'm not going to not do the things that I love because I'm afraid I'm going to die. That's dumb.
Yeah.
Because I was never afraid to die. Honestly, even when that was happening, I really, truly had zero fear around my own death. I really didn't. I thought, well, if this is my time, I'm totally good with that.
Now, did you ever go in at any time? Did you ever go in and out of any consciousness or extreme dizziness? Was it like where were you at in terms of your own mental awareness?
The mental aware. Well, that was when the episode happened. The episode I had what I could only describe as what I would imagine a stroke might feel like when I started to see stars, and it got kind of black. I didn't have some vision, or it didn't feel like a spiritual moment for me at the time. Yeah. But that's what triggered me to go to Barrows, because they were terrified. I said, this just happened and I don't know what that was. And they're like, this is too big of a case for us to handle. She needs to go over there. Wow. So, but that was the only thing I would say that was different or a weird visual experience. That and just the emotional feeling of, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm watching my funeral. Like, this is so bizarre. And I had a calm and a peace over myself. I was not, the struggle I was having was watching the pain, of your loved one. Yeah. And my kids, it was like, oh my gosh, if I leave my kids and my husband, that's going to be so hard for them. That was the pain. But for me, no, I mean, I really had zero fear. Yeah. So that was good to know about myself, because that was a testing moment to know that. Yeah. Oh, definitely. It's pretty cool.
Okay. So then when was like the real kind of like, okay, there's more, and I'm seeing and feeling and sensing more as a spiritual human?
So that came when one of the magazine people, I had been told by dozens of people in the community saying, do you know this person? Do you know this person? They'd say her name over and over. And I'm not going to say her name because she's a big name, okay. But over and over and over. And I'd say, yeah, everybody keeps telling me I need to meet her. Okay, I will meet her. And finally, at an event, a nonprofit event that we went to, we were standing in a circle together, and I knew who she was, but she didn't know who I was. Right. Standing in the circle talking, and somebody's like, hey, Tammy Fellows. And she stops and she's like, you're Tammy Fellows? And I said, yeah. She's like, oh my God, do you have any idea how many people have said I need to meet you? I'm like, I think that's crazy because I've heard the same thing about you. Oh my gosh. And she's like, follow me. So we exchanged phone numbers, and she's like, let's go get lunch. And I said, I'd love to. So fast forward, we scheduled our lunch. Well, in the interim, before we had our lunch, I was expressing my concerns around memory loss. I was having real memory loss. So okay.
So it did come up later on. Okay, I was wondering, yeah.
This was years later. This was back in 2021, early 21. Okay. And so I was having this memory loss. Like, it would be a Monday and somebody would say, what'd you do this weekend? And it was blank. Like nothing recorded. Wow. And I couldn't recall one thing. And I would tell Eric, I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I don't know if I have an early onset of Alzheimer's or what's going on, but I really am not forgetting. I'm not remembering.
And were you still doing the blood thinners at this point?
No. That was way done. That was back in 2012 and 13.
Right. No, I was just wondering if there was any residue of that, or was this like a new thing now?
This was totally new. So when I was sharing this with my family, I had my sister and my mom, and I was telling them, I said, I'm really getting kind of freaked out. I'm having this memory loss, and I don't know where it's coming from. I'm a pretty intelligent person. I feel like my brain's very active. It's not like I'm stagnant by any stretch. And my mom and my sister laughed, and they're like, Tammy, you do so much. Do you know how much you do? And I said, well, yeah, of course I do. That's just who I am. That's what I do, right? That's me. And my mom said, have you ever tried meditation? And I was like,
Mom said this.
My mom said this.
I love it.
And I said, no, that's a joke. I can't meditate. My brain's too loud. Like, forget it. That's funny, Mom. Like, no. She's like, I'm just telling you. I think that what's going on is you are too full and you're forgetting because there's no capacity to hold anything in there. And I think you need to get quiet.
Oh.
You know what? I'm desperate. I will do this. So that was over a weekend, that next Monday, being the Capricorn box checker that I am, I was like, okay, Monday morning, I'm going to do my first meditation and I'm going to do it. And I'm going to check each box all day, every day this week, right? That's how I operated. And so I did that. I sat down and I did a guided meditation because I had no idea where to start. So I just put in an app and I did a 10-minute guided meditation and it was great. I enjoyed it and I continued, but here's the kicker. That very day that I did my first meditation happened to be the same day that I was meeting that woman for lunch. And when I met her for lunch, we sat together for 3 hours and she was telling me her life story. Again, I sit with people and I don't even know I don't know what's going to happen. And I didn't hear, so I didn't know. We sat down and she's telling me her life she has a really colorful story. She's lived like 5 lives in one. So she's sharing all these stories with me, really spiritual things, which I've always been very open to spirituality. I just hadn't really experienced it myself. So I was always very open. I'm thankful to both my mom and my dad because they both are very open to that.
Now, were you raised with any organized religion, Catholic, Christian, Protestant, Episcopal, anything, Mormon, anything?
Mormon. We were a very, very strict Mormon family, but both my parents left the church around age 8 when they split.
Wow. Okay.
So my dad stayed a little longer than my mom, but my mom, when they divorced,
and the stepdad was not into the Mormon.
They both left the church. My stepdad too.
Okay.
But my biological dad did later as well. So none of my family's practicing Mormon anymore.
Okay.
What happened was they went on their own spiritual journeys. My dad separate from my mom because they weren't together anymore, but they both kind of had their own spiritual growth and journeys. And I saw that as witness to that. That's why I was always open to it, thankfully.
Wow.
So anyway, I'm sitting with this woman and she's telling me all these really amazing, beautiful stories. Again, tears, the whole thing.
Right.
And finally, she's like, I have to go. I have a meeting, but I need to tell you something. And I said, well, what do you need to tell me? And she said, well, I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but from the second you sat down, Tammy, there's a whole family standing behind you. And I was like, I immediately started crying because I knew exactly who it was.
Right. And I want you to share that because that's kind of like where we were leading and going to. Yes. Oh my God.
So what I learned was, and I have goosebumps talking about it right now.
Yeah, me too.
Profound moment for me. So I'll preface what I say, what happened at my lunch with this. When my mother was 21, she was married to my dad, and she was the oldest of 4 kids.
Okay.
Her 2 parents and her 2 brothers and one of her brother's fiance went on my grandfather was a private pilot, so he had a plane.
Right.
They left the day after Christmas in 1971
So it wasn't all of her siblings?
Her
and one sibling did not go on the flight.
Baby sister, who was 5 at the time, she was babysitting her. So those 2 stayed back. My mom and her baby sister.
Wow. And
my mom's mom, dad, and her 2 brothers and one of the brothers' fiance went on this private flight on December 26, 1971, to fly from Arizona to Salt Lake City for a ski trip. Again, we were skiers. My own family from skiers. So they went over for a ski trip. Well, what happened was on that plane ride over, they went through a blizzard and the visibility was bad and they crashed into a mountain and they were all killed.
Oh, Tammy.
So the thing that's so interesting about that is I've said this story hundreds of times because it's part of my life, right? Even though I'm living it, I've lived it through my mom and my sister. Yeah. She's my sister now. I never knew her as anything but my sister because my mom and my dad adopted her little sister. So they raised her.
Wow.
So, but having told this story so many times, it's just kind of a matter of fact of just my family history, right?
Yeah.
And it always gets a really strong reaction because it's tremendously true.
It's heart-wrenching. And the day after Christmas, oh my gosh.
Well, and they were missing for 6 months because after they crashed, they were buried by snow. So they were not discovered. The plane and the bodies were not discovered for 6 months.
So there was just no one found them. They were just missing, no police report, nothing. Oh my gosh.
So it was horrible.
And we know back then in the 70s, there were no cell phone. There was oh my gosh.
Yeah. So the thing that's interesting though is since I was a child, and you asked about when did you wake up? there has always been something unique about me. And I think that probably most people, if they can recall back to their childhood, that they've had some sort of a spiritual experience, because the veil is so much thinner when we're young.
Yes.
So you have experiences that you don't really, a lot of people just don't remember.
Right.
And I had a lot of things that would happen. I would see things before they'd happen.
Right.
I didn't even, like, you know how you have weird things from your memories and you just think, oh, that was just normal. And it's normal, but like it's unique to what we know as this existence. Right. So there were things that happened. And it's interesting. You talked about me and my mom. My mom has always said about me since I was born, was that she was always afraid that I was going to be taken from her, killed, or something was going to happen to me. And she's always had this strong feeling about it. She just has it much less now. But when I had the carotid thing, she's like, here it is, here it is. I knew it. She had this fear around it her whole life. Now, granted, she has some fear of loss because she lost her whole family.
Oh, I mean, God, she has every right. Your mother has every right to have. And you know what's so funny? Saturn is stress, anxiety, and fear. And it's conjunct your moon, which is representing you, but also your mother.
Right. Her fear around that was specific to me, not her other kids.
Yeah, just to you. Yeah, it's your chart. Yeah, very specific.
So me having these experiences in my youth that I've now, as I've walked in my spiritual journey more, there's been some recall. But I will say this, I've always felt very, very connected to my grandfather, who's my mom's dad, who was killed in the crash. So much that I feel like we're close. Like I feel his blood in my veins. I feel we have very similar interests. He was a race car driver. He was an adrenaline junkie. He was a man's man. I have lived most of my life in very masculine energy, masculine energy. So I channeled him my whole life, and I've known this. Well, so what happened was I'm sitting at lunch and she says, your family's behind you. And I start crying and I say, I know who it is. And she said, who is it? And I told her, and
she told her the story.
She said, that's exactly who it is. And she said, and the thing that's so interesting about this, I guess I should probably just say the name because it's relevant here. So it's Pat Bondurant. She's a good friend of mine. So her late husband, Bob Bondurant, ran the racing school. He's a famous race car driver. Well, he actually raced with my grandfather.
What?
Mm-hmm. So the fact that people kept saying, get together, get together, get together. And then the first time we get together, that happens. And he comes through to her, who's in the racing world. It's like, there's no accidents, right?
Wow. Whoa, that's heavy. So, okay. So then this really got you to question and awaken.
This woke me up, period. Period. I left that lunch and I was like, oh, this is it. This is it. And so I called my mom and my sister immediately and told them what happened, and they were blown away. And I will say this, Pat is not a trained medium, but she picks up energy, and she was picking this up very clearly. And I'm grateful to her for that, because she brought me an awareness that I didn't have previously, which truly set me on my spiritual journey. After that, of course, I never missed a meditation.
I was going to say, you're like, well, since I've been meditating.
First time that happened. First time. I mean, you can't make that up.
So, okay. So this is wild. So all of this, and then the story with your mom. Now, where for you, your aunt, who's really like your sister, do you guys have a spiritual connection? And how does she view your mom? Did she in some way like consider her mom, or was it just like the big sister?
Oh, no. She was little enough. She embraced her as her mother, 100%. My mom is truly her mom. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. They have a different chemistry.
Yeah.
And their chemistry, because they can fight and they can be really close. It's interesting. Their karmic energy, I wish I could look at it, because it's big.
Yeah, no. That's why I had to ask, because it was just pouring on me. Like, yeah. And see, so as you're saying this, like, you have Uranus and Scorpio in the second house, which is quite literally your family, stuff like that. But it gives you that sixth sense. When Uranus is the spiritual awakener, it's our freedom, our liberation, how we kind of break the social norms, fracture the structures. but it's like activating the throat chakra and our five senses. So how often do you feel, even throughout your life, and when you had the magazines and now with the podcast and your experience and your mother's, do you feel that sometimes you get divinely guided, not just in terms of your intuition and perception, but in terms of what you find that you need to say to someone else?
Absolutely. That was not, well, here's what's funny. I'm now aware of that. I've always done it. Now I'm aware of it.
Okay.
That's it. I've always done it, but I didn't realize what was happening until I realized what was happening.
But can you share like an experience or story or even something with your kids where the download that provoked you to share something or to speak it, how it, became a revelation of truth for someone else and maybe even people in your own family?
Well, it's interesting because family dynamics have so much baggage. And so there's blocks.
Yeah.
And so as I started to wake up, my truth could only just come out like vomit. I mean, I could not speak my truth. And to the point where in the beginning stages of my walk, I even believe, because it was so new to me, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm special. And I am special. Of course I'm special.
Yeah.
I thought, I have these gifts. And oh my gosh, I need to tell everybody that I've got these gifts. I didn't know I had these. And then as I started to realize, I was like, oh shit, we all have these gifts.
In a multitude of different ways, and they manifest in different ways for every single human. Yeah.
Yes. But at the time I was like thinking, oh my gosh, I'm like, I have these gifts and I know there's other people that do, but actually all of us do. We just either we're tapped into them or we're not. And that's okay.
Right.
I hadn't been until this point. And what started to happen was as I've walked and really understood how everything really does work to the best of my ability in this realm, right. It's become more clear to me that you can be divinely guided to speak truth to somebody, but they're not always ready to hear it. So I only do that when I feel called and I feel like it will be received, because there's plenty of downloads I get that I keep to myself.
Right.
Unless I'm prompted or asked for guidance.
Wow.
And that's it. Because I can't, I tried it the other way around at first and I got a lot of resistance and I realized that's not how this works. This is
right.
This should not be resisted. This should be embraced and received, and it wasn't. So I had to kind of slow my roll and wait till it was ready on the receiving end. So when it is ready on the receiving end, I absolutely give it. And I have a lot of it, but I don't only give it when I know it's asked for or ready to be received. And I'm much more intuitive about knowing that now.
And then how does that play out as a mother of 4 sons?
It's really interesting because I will say my oldest son, he even said, I think on his podcast, because I've had all my kids except for one on my podcast. Okay. And I've done that for a very specific reason.
Yeah.
And well, lots of reasons. One reason is I want a timestamp of where they are in their walk.
Right.
And I want them to hear back where they were then later. Yes. And that's powerful. And the conversations with all of them weren't necessarily as deeply spiritual as they have been with my other guests. However, right. They each have their own contribution to different things and how they see things. So for instance, my oldest son, he's probably my biggest fan on the podcast. He does not miss an episode. Aww. And he always gives me feedback. He calls me from college. He's like, oh my gosh, I just watched the episode from so-and-so and that was cool. Or what did that mean? Or what was this? So he's very, very curious. He's very, he's observing and just watching. And
did he like my episode?
He loved it. What's not to love? You're awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Anyway.
I like to hear that young folks, even though it's your son, but still that someone of the youth is kind of ingesting or connecting and receiving. That's powerful.
Right. But when I compare how they take kind of where I'm at with respect to each other, my boys, that is,
yeah.
My youngest, who I just had on, actually his went live today. His, again, because he's younger, so the veil's thinner, so he has more experiences, and I'm also in a totally different space where I'm pulling this out of him and allowing it, making it safe because I understand it better now for myself. Yeah. So when he has something, I'm not like brushing it off. I'm like, wait, what happened? Tell me more. And so it's caused him to be more open with his experiences And, you know, you can only go so far in each path because it's their own choice, right? They're a soul. They have to make their own choices of how they're going to walk this life.
That's right.
But I will say he has been much more open to having these real experiences, not just conversations, but experiences and shareable experiences with me, which has been really cool. So it's just kind of it's everybody, each one of them are in their different way, and they all have totally different personalities and their own different experiences. So it's hard to compare them each. You can't, you can't compare them. But it's been interesting to watch them see me evolve and change, because I have evolved and changed dramatically.
I could imagine, like, that it's almost like meeting, and I would try to jump into their own heads, like meeting a new mom.
Mm-hmm.
Now, was out of the four, you know, and maybe the oldest was more aware probably, but they were all young back when you went through your experience with the artery. Did you sense any changes in any of them at that young age in terms of their connection, or even maybe a fear of losing mom? Like, how did that dynamic play out?
That's a great question. I can't recall knowing that right now. I don't know that there was a moment of me seeing that in them, because a lot of the experience they had when this was happening, mom was just gone. She was in the hospital for a long time. So dad was home with them, and dad was terrified and emotional. And so they're seeing that, but he's also trying to be strong and provide and all the stuff. Right. So how that's morphed them with that experience, I don't really know. But I will say this, I think that they were pretty naive to it, honestly, because when I've talked about it in later years, now that they actually understand what happens, they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Like, I didn't realize.
Right. No. And that's what you see with kids with in their youth. You know, a lot of that stuff just goes into their subconscious mind. They block it out. So they're not even conscious of it at the time. They're just kind of living life, and, oh, mom's not here. I hope mom's going to get better. And it's just real basic, you know, lower level. But that's really fascinating. So, okay. So now let's smile and breathe and talk about all the expansion and growth of Tammy Tuesday, because you are really trying, and not trying, you're a doer. And I love that. You're creating a beautiful space. So I want you to, number one, share, and we'll do it at the end, but share, you know, if, you know, you've got the website and different things, but share for people who may want to, and let them know in terms of what you're getting really into with the spiritual coaching, but also the creative studio. So share that, and then kind of when it will all be ready, so for people to potentially reach out and even use or connect at your studio.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's great because there's, of course, now with everything I do, all has synergy, which is like, oh, aha. And when you start to see it, you're like, oh my gosh, that's how this works. It's pretty cool. So with Tammy Tuesday, the podcast, which is funny because even the name Tammy Tuesday, again, does not express what it is, which is something I'm struggling. There may be a rebrand in the future.
Right.
But that being said, Tammy Tuesday has a website, tammytuesday.com, which is where you can download a mini ebook about how people discovering what their purpose is. You can contact me to approach me for potential coaching, life coaching, and sharing my experiences with you. But what's so, again, Eric, my husband, as my muse. So we had another business in a location that was not really, it was underutilized. And so we thought, well, this is such a great location. Maybe we should morph it into another business. Well, Tammy being like, I'm done with workaholic, Tammy. I'm not about to go launch some business that I don't care about. No, thank you. And he's like, okay, whatever. He's like, but have you thought about this? And I'm like, no. Well, finally, the stars aligned and I started getting input from different places. And it was like, wait a minute, I think you need to look at this again. So I had this interesting experience. Eric and I have this habit in the morning where we sit with coffee in our two big chairs when the kids are all still asleep because we get up really early.
Yeah.
And that's when we share the things that we dreamt about that night or what our morning meditation brought, like all the stuff. And we're sitting there talking and I was going over kind of what I thought my next thing was going to be. And he said, have you thought any more about the space that we have and maybe opening the business that I mentioned to you? And just to kind of give you an idea, he was talking about potentially opening this location to do all things creative. So podcasting, content creation, videography, a spiritual space for people to come and do spiritual gatherings or workshops, like all of it, right?
Right.
All that. It's the perfect space to create these different studios, if you will, to do these things.
Yeah.
And I got the strong download through tears, because I know now when I cry that's my soul breaking through to me.
Aww.
And I started to cry, and I said, I don't know why I'm crying, but I know that it means that I need to pay attention. So I'm listening. And we started to talk through it. And all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, this is it. And the people and the things started falling into place miraculously at that very, very moment, literally.
Wow.
Texts started coming in, all this stuff started happening. And I was like, okay, I'm listening. I hear you. So what that's now turned into is I decided to move forward with this. And Eric is still very much involved in his business, and he'll be involved in this business to some degree. But what the business is this, we're naming it Creator Studios.
Creator Studios. Okay.
It's a location where people can come here and create content. They can come here and create art. They can come here and create anything they want to create, because we are all creators. That's why we came here.
That's right.
That's the name is like, even when Eric and I came up with the name, it was totally divine. It was divinely directed how it all came together, because it's Creator, CRE8 TOR Studios. And the suite number is number 8. My logo has an infinity sign, and we were seeing all these signs all over the place about this name. So it was like, okay, that's it. So
Creator, I love that with the 8. Oh my God. Okay.
So we're building this place.
And wait, you're doing this, and it's a universal 8-year, Tammy.
I know. I'm telling you, there's no accidents. There's no coincidences.
Oh my God. I love that. Okay, go ahead.
When you're in flow, you just can't stop it. It's crazy. So anyway, so we're opening this studio. We're working on building out the rooms now. I'm super excited that we're putting all the people in place, and my podcast will move over to this place now, because I've been doing it somewhere else. So I'm excited about that. But it's going to have sound studios where you can record voiceovers or videos, instruction videos. It's going to have all kinds of options. People that want to record commercials, radio commercials or video, whatever it is you want to do. And then the spiritual space, which I'm super excited about, will be a place where, because I have a whole spiritual network, you're in that network of people that need space to gather.
Or teach a class or workshop or, oh my gosh.
So it's going to have all of those components. We have a huge studio, or a huge warehouse in the back that's going to be a huge photography studio for photographers to come and create and do photo shoots.
This sounds amazing.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it.
And it's in Scottsdale, Arizona, correct?
Oh yeah, it's in the Scottsdale Air Park.
Wow, Tammy. Oh my gosh. So oh my gosh. So, okay. So this is, your new vision and baby. I can't wait to see it and hopefully be a part of it and use it and all that stuff. That sounds awesome. So now this is powerful, because I want to get to the beginning and then the transition of you and your husband, because I know that you had a really fascinating meeting and how you connected, but then I also want you to share kind of where he was, because you talk about him being your muse, and people may not think, right, he does his thing and he's in real estate and all that maybe he may not be some big spiritual guy, but I know what you've shared in a lot of ways, he's really more spiritual than you even really probably knew. So share that with the audience, just kind of the meeting, but then also after you started to awaken, how did that play out in your marriage?
This is a really huge point. And I think another part of my purpose, because I think that I'm going to be working in relationships. So, and I mean romantic relationships. So first of all, we met our last year in college. He's 4 years older than me. He played in the collegiate tennis world. So he played athletics. So we met at the University of Arizona, and we lived in the same apartment complex. He was literally on a pit stop for the summer on his way to go play the European Tour tennis.
Oh, wow.
And he was staying with a friend in the same apartment complex where I lived. So he was staying there for a couple of months for the summer. And they were celebrating his friend's birthday party out at the pool. And my apartment looked right out at the pool. And so the outlet wasn't working to plug in their stereo. So they wanted to plug in their music. They're looking around and they see me and my girlfriend walking around inside. So, you know, of course, he comes and knocks on the door with his friend. Well, the moment the door opened, something was happening, like immediately. And people always say, do you believe in love at first sight? If there is love at first sight, now I understand things in a different way.
Yes.
There was a soul connection that was immediately recognizable. So as soon as that door opened, he and I were smitten from the second we laid eyes on each other. And it was not a sexual attraction like, oh, they're so cute, they're good looking. It was nothing like that. It was cosmic. And we were immediately drawn to each other. So they borrowed our electricity and I went out for the night, came back. Well, the next day he came and he took me to lunch. And the next day we grilled outside together. I don't know if I told you this. Maybe I did.
I don't think so. Yeah.
We grilled outside together because we were just getting to know each other. And we were sharing life stories of our families and how we grew up and all the stuff that we love to do. And we had a ton in common. And we were laughing at how much we had in common, like the similar things that we liked. And he's like, shit, do you want to get married? And I go, yeah.
Wait a minute. Oh my God. Wait. So you're 4 years apart. Now, was he from Arizona as well or no?
No, he's from Montana originally.
Okay. Okay. That's okay. The connection.
His dad was in the military, he's in the Air Force. So he lived all over the place. So anyway, he went to high school in upstate New York, and then he was in college in Colorado Springs. He's been everywhere.
Okay.
So, but he's in Arizona, right? In my apartment complex. And now he's like,
do you want to get married? And you're like, yeah.
I laugh and I'm like, sure. Well, we were friends for about 6 months. Like it wasn't super romantic. It was just friendship. And finally I was like, look, here's the deal. I'm in. I don't know what you're waiting for, but I'm leaving. Like I was flying to the East Coast for an internship after I graduated. And I said, I'm going. So I don't know what you're doing, but this is happening. So anyway, I ended up going across the East Coast and he followed me and the rest is history.
Wow. Okay. So he stops the tennis?
He still did tennis for a long time. What happened was I was on the East Coast for an internship and then I got headhunted and got a job in California, Southern California. And he left Tucson to come to California to be with me. And then 9/11 happened and we decided to move back to Arizona. And he decided to pursue his real estate career. And that's where he started his real estate.
Wow.
We were engaged. When we moved back to Arizona, we were engaged.
And now you've been married how many years?
In November, it'll be 22 years.
That is so freaking awesome.
I'm excited to tell you this piece, though. This is huge.
Yes. That's yes. I want to know when you started to go through the spiritual journey and awaken. Yeah.
So as I started to wake up, I started to become hyper conscious, super conscious of everything. I was receiving everything. It was like an open funnel. It was coming in and it was coming in hard and fast, and I was overwhelmed.
Right.
And to the point where it was too much because I was still running my businesses, but I was still receiving all this stuff and I was feeling extremely overwhelmed. Okay. And I wasn't sharing my growth with him at this point because I frankly was worried he was going to judge me and think that I was weird.
Really?
Because I was experiencing.
It seems like you guys have always had, I mean, just from me literally meeting you one time, obviously we've met, but just meeting you and your husband together one time. Yeah, I would see it would seem as if you could tell him anything, right?
Well, this is where I was getting in my way.
Okay.
Because I could tell him anything. So I was keeping things from him because, first of all, I didn't know how to share them because this was a new expression that I didn't understand yet.
Okay. Yeah. So you're integrating yourself. Yeah.
Yes. I'm like, this is wild. Like, I can't believe this is happening. I'm understanding these things and I don't even know how to explain them into words. How do I share this? It was confusing. And so as I'm going through this growth, it was super exciting and I was loving every second of it. And I knew there was no going back.
Right.
Where my fear started to come in was, I'm not going back. Like, this is where I'm going and I'm not getting off this path now. Like, I've seen the path and I'm on it. I'm firmly on it. I'm not going back this way.
Yeah.
So what started to make me nervous was, oh my gosh, I hope that he wants to join me over here because I'm not leaving this path.
Right.
What does that mean for my marriage? Because we're different souls. We're on different paths.
Right, right.
And so the less I was sharing with him, the harder it started to get for me and become more stressful. And so finally I hit a breaking point where I was so overwhelmed by everything that I was receiving and understanding and growing and through that I said to him, we have got to talk. I need to tell you what's been going on. So we sat down, we went to this loud lunch place and I started to cry. He's like, oh my gosh, let's get out of here. So he drove me into like this little, by a lake in our neighborhood. And we just parked and we parked there and I just cried. I cried for 5 minutes. I just cried and cried and cried. And he just let me. And after I finally calmed myself down, I started to just divulge all the things that had been happening, all the awarenesses, all the awakenings, all the things. And he listened very patiently.
Right.
And he said this, when I finally paused, there you are. I knew you'd show up. And I started to cry again. And I was like, when I say this, I
love Eric. That, oh my God, that was his response.
Yes. Yes.
See, because, and remember what I said earlier in the show, we have blind spots and sometimes it's our loved ones that they see who we really are and we're kind of figuring it out and struggling and don't see ourselves. So yeah. Did he already know you were going through this or he knew you were going to be at this place anyway?
He knew that there was something about me that was going to be big. And so he was ready for that moment for me to finally claim it and own it for myself. And so, and it's not even that he was on the same spiritual path at all. Like
yeah.
And the experiences I was having, he's never had. So this was all new to him, but he was extremely open to it and not surprised because he knew that was coming for me. He could see it coming.
Yeah.
Even though he didn't understand it.
Right.
And he said, I'm here. He's like, let's do this. I'm on board. And I was like, holy shit, my marriage is going to make it. This is amazing. I mean, I was like thrilled. And ever since then, I share everything
with him. Yeah.
Every experience. I'm like, you're not going to believe this. You're not going to believe what I saw. You're not going to. And he laughs. He's like, of course. And it's funny. He has a joke. He'll say, like, I was waiting for you to catch up, but now you have way surpassed me. And I just laugh. But it's funny because, yeah, he saw it way before I did.
Tammy, that's so wonderful. And that even layers, and I'm sure in terms of your, coaching and even, helping to guide couples and things like that, that's magical because it's such a part of your love story. But even I think of it as your soul story. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yep. And that's such a wild and amazing thing. So, okay, so now you're at this place. Where do you see the energy going for us, the collective? Like, we know we're going through these X-class and M-class solar flares. The world's been bat poopy crazy since 2012, but even more so, obviously, we know since COVID in 2020. But in terms of your downloads, your soul, your remembrance, your spiritual growth, leave the audience with your thoughts, your vision, your heart, but just where do you think all this is headed to?
I truly believe in my soul. I am extremely hopeful. I see a lot of love. Yeah. I see a very, very brighter than we even know future. And it's funny, Eric and I were talking about this just yesterday. The best part of the unknown is the unknown. And that is where it's exciting.
Yeah.
Because that's where your trust and your faith come in. And for me, in my path, it's bright. Because I know what I am. I know that I am light. And I know that the people that are in my life are light. And that I know that I'm around those that I need to be around right now. And I do feel like that's going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. So as a collective, I do see a lot of hope. I see a lot of shift. I see a lot of openness. I think people are ready to wake up. Many of us have.
Yeah.
And I think more of us will continue to do that. And I think the more we do that as a collective, the better off this place is going to be in this experience, because what a magical experience we're getting to have, right? I mean, it's been in my walk, one of the things that I'm so strong in right now, and again, one of my pieces of purpose are talking about the masculine and feminine energy and how they need to live together, and how you compare that to our human body and our soul. And when they are married and truly in unison together and can flow together, you can create a beautiful masterpiece of a life and experience abundance and joy and all of the things that bring you happiness and peace, right? So when I see that, that's a big piece of what I think I will teach people to understand and embrace, because it's so important to not just be this woo-woo, I want to have all these mystical experiences. No, I need to sit in this body and feel what this body feels like, and remember that what's inside is all that, and it's part of this. It's all the same system, and they're working together to have this amazing experience. So embrace it.
I love that. And it's so apropos of your earth energy that you kind of want to bring all the spiritual information and downloads and experiences to the 3D physical reality. And I think that that's kind of the composition and the perfect balance that, as the Libra rising that you have, that people need to learn to integrate, right? That we are these souls and spiritual beings, but we're still having a 3D physical experience. And so how do we marry the two to live our lives and our soul purpose? And I think, I know that that's something that you and I are both on that journey and process and figuring out. And it makes things so much fun and so joyful. And I love that you speak about that, and that you exist and manifest that and share that with the collective. So that's so beautiful.
Thank you. I love it. I can't not know, you can't not know something once you know it, once you understand it.
So everything will be down below in the description, but listen, we got to brag a little bit. I want you just to name drop, because you have had some amazing guests. I mean, amazing. And one of them will be coming on my show this week. In terms of, Galiana doing the soul contracts. But you guys, Tammy Tuesday, you got to check out this podcast. I mean, well, you share some of the names because,
Well, I don't like to discriminate against my guests because they're all.
Okay, no. Let me say, all of them are amazing, including me. But
exactly.
Just even Alison Dubois, who's, the psychic medium and had the TV show on NBC with Patricia Arquette. That interview, oh my God, so fascinating. And she seems like just the sweetest, most honest, pure, direct woman, but just like authentically her. And I thought that was riveting. And, you could even share like Galiana, who will be coming on here, thanks to connecting through you. But people, go to YouTube, subscribe right now, support this woman and her podcast, but be informed, be inspired, and be entertained, right? Because and I love the energy and how you ask your question, just all of it. You're just a natural, so I love it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I love doing it. So that's probably.
Now, did you have in terms of people watching it, they can catch it on YouTube. Where else can they catch the Tammy Tuesday podcast?
So Tammy Tuesday Podcast is available on all podcast listening platforms. So you can find it anywhere you listen, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any place that you listen. Okay. You can find it there. So it's just Tammy Tuesday. And then, of course, YouTube. And then I also have them on my website, which is just TammyTuesday.com.
Okay, cool. Okay. All right, and people can connect with you there. Now, do you have do you do a podcast a week in terms of when you release them? Like, is there a schedule, or what could people, look for from the channel, or, you even going forward?
Yes, so they drop every Tuesday, which shouldn't shock anyone. And I have one a week. I've been doing it. I started it just this year in 2024 because this is my goal.
Okay, great. So it's definitely Tammy Tuesday on Tuesdays, premiering new podcast.
Correct.
That's awesome.
Yes. Right. And then be on the lookout because I do have Creator Studios, which is coming online, and that will be an amazing space for anybody who's looking to have, short-term, hourly type situations for photography, podcasting, you name it. We have all the services that come with that. So we're just building it out. My goal is to have it open in September at some point. So that's kind of where we're at. We're just building things now.
Okay.
It's going to be an amazing space, but that will be living on the website at creatorstudios.com, and it's creator with an 8 in the middle.
Okay. So, creatorstudios.com. Okay. So we'll put that down below so everyone can read that in the description. Wow. Thank you, my friend. This has been so amazing and just authentically Tammy Tuesday. I love it.
I'm grateful for you, Eric. Thank you for the beauty you share with this world. You are truly a shining light and a beacon. I'm grateful to know you.
I feel the same way, my friend. Thank you. Everybody, please like, share, subscribe, but share this podcast because, as I always mention to my audience, Tammy, and I know you're aware of this, sometimes we think that our friends or family or loved ones that are, maybe not awakened or into talking about spirituality, that, they would never care or watch something like this. But sometimes it may just take that one share, that one text, and that they just happen to hit the button and they sit and watch, and then they just receive. So don't hesitate to share, this show, this episode. Check out Tammy Tuesday's podcast because you really don't know when someone will awaken or what could be the impetus to spark that, to give them the fire, to them to say, wow, maybe I should meditate like Tammy started, or question this or question that. And so please make sure you don't be afraid to do that. Faith over fear, and share. This is episode 230 of our My Knowledge is Love Astrology podcast with the amazing Tammy Fellows, Miss Tammy Tuesday. So again, Tammy, thank you. And goodbye, everybody. Bye, Tammy.